Welcome to another edition of the Brazilian Shirt Name podcast. I'm Dotun in London. He's the legendino Tim Vickery in Rio, looking very sharp and smart, summery, suntanned. And that's just me, Tim.
Yes, and we've got a very special guest today, haven't we? Someone
Indeed.
who we've had on before,
He's a proper stirrer, you know that.
yes, yes, I do, yes, I do,
Yeah.
and he stirs the pot in many, many different directions. Come on down and introduce yourself.
Adrian
Yeah,
Goldberg.
hello, one and all. Yeah, that's a reference, by the way. People might not get it, but in the West Midlands, I used to run a kind of politics and news website at the same time, like you, Dotton, is doing an overnight radio show called The Stirrer. And for 3 or 4 years, that kind of made a bit of a splash in West Midlands politics. These days, I'm stirring it, running the Byline Times podcast. So, trying to keep politicians on their toes, hold them to account for their misdemeanors, regardless of their political stripe. So, all very exciting. But as you know, as you guys know from this podcast, a massive football fan. And when I got the chance to come back again, I wanted to talk about the first tournament that I went to abroad, Euro 88. And in the public imagination in the UK, I think this is probably associated mostly with hooliganism. I know that there was a big dust up in Dusseldorf between England fans and German supporters. It was the moment when Margaret Thatcher decided to absolutely double down on her identity card scheme for English football supporters. Came just 2 or 3 years after that riot at Luton involving Millwall supporters. So although it's got that kind of tinge to it, I've got to say, I went with my mate Anne. She was just a friend, by the way, let me stress. And
we didn't say a word.
No,
We haven't got there yet.
don't pin that one on us.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's 28 years later or what. I just want to make it clear.
It's probably good that you tell us, because back in 1988, Dotton would have had eyes on her had he known.
That's not true. That is not true. What I would like to say in my defense is that back in 1988, I just finished university, but nevertheless, I was still within the sort of student framework. You know what students are like. You know, they can't control their libidos. But the bit that Tim said isn't true, not quite accurately, factually. Although fictionally, yeah, that was me. I had my eyes on her.
Were you there, Adrian? Did you go because you thought, as I did, going into the tournament, that England had a serious chance?
And in a way, because of that.
Yeah, in a way, we weren't far wrong because of what happened in Italia 90. But obviously, 88 is when, in the absence of Terry Butcher, and with Gascoigne yet to have come through, it all went horribly wrong and we lost all 3 games. But is that one of the reasons that you went to Germany?
I think so. It was also partly for the adventure. My dad was German, albeit that he was a German Jew who was forced to leave the country as a young kid. But I had some kind of interest in Germany. But also, yeah, I was just starting. I'd already been to quite a lot of away games following West Brom, my team. And I'd started watching then England matches. I was both horrified and fascinated in equal measure by England supporters, some of whom were like us, just kind of straight up, ordinary, fun-loving football fans, some of whom most definitely weren't. So there was a kind of grim fascination about that. But it was about adventure for me. I hadn't travelled much as a young man, and here was a chance to go with a friend. I stress, just a friend, and watch loads of great football. I had tickets for all England's games. And during the course of the tournament, I met a guy, because I was writing a football fanzine at the time called Off the Ball. This was, my passion at the time. It was my not quite job. It occupied about 70 hours a week. And so I was finding my way in football journalism. And along the way, because of previous connections I'd made, I met up with John Williams from the Centre for Football Research at Leicester University. So when England were knocked out, John was incredible. He had great contacts. He was able to sort me out tickets for some of the later games. We went to both semi-finals. And although I had to buy my final ticket off a tout, I had a wonderful time even after England had got knocked out. It was very different after England had got knocked out, as you might imagine. But I love watching the England games, and I love watching the other games that I saw there as well. It was a great tournament for me.
I'm surprised, Adrian, and thank you for introducing this theme to the Brazilian Shirt Name podcast. The last time I spoke to you, and in fact, the last time you were a guest on the Brazilian Shirt Name podcast, I think you were the host of the podcast "Where's the Money Gone" at that time, yeah?
Yeah,
Are
yeah,
you
we're
still
still
doing that?
making
Yeah,
that. Me and Charlie
good,
Methven, yeah.
good. But you introduced us to what it was like being a Baggies fan, because you're Baggies through and through and through, and managed to pass that on to your daughters, which is impressive, or at least one of them, as I recall. And when you go away, when you introduce this idea of going to follow England, like you have the Barmy Army, my younger brother, yes, my younger brother, although of Nigerian heritage, born here in Britain, to be fair to him, goes off with the Barmy Army. And I'm like, what are you doing there?
Wow.
And it's a different experience for him going off with the Barmy Army and then going to watch cricket. And it's a different experience for him being a black Barmy Army supporter than particularly when you go to places like India, where people are like, no, there's no Africans in this hotel kind of thing, which he has experienced. But
Wow.
I always dreamt of going off to see England play an overseas tournament. And you did that, and you lived the dream for a lot of us. I know at the time, and we'll get more into the landscape of the times, which you've introduced very eloquently, actually, and brought a lot of elements that I'd forgotten about. The Thatcher crackdown on England supporters. Can you believe it? Anyway, but what I'm surprised that nobody's made a movie, and I'm surprised that you haven't made at least a documentary of being an England fan and following England, because it's
Someone finance Adrian's documentary, please.
Yeah,
Where has the money gone?
Bring it on, yeah.
yeah, and don't forget to give Dotun a job on it as well. But you do a great voiceover. Yeah, Dotun would do an excellent one, I think. But no, generally, it is a particular beast, isn't it? Being an England supporter and following England, not just at home games, overseas. And we're not like all rich and wealthy and everything. It is a holiday experience, sometimes a once in a lifetime experience. Sometimes, it's the experience that triggers many other um, tours with England.
Did the experience of following England around 88 when they lost all 3 games, did it put you off following England away?
It put me off so much that I went to all their games at Italia 90 as well.
That's the answer. Yes.
I mean, when Euro 96 was here, in that tournament, I probably watched about a dozen games. I mean, there's something about a tournament, isn't there? I'm not necessarily mad on international football per se, but the experience of a tournament when there are people gathered from all over the world, mostly in good spirit, mostly in good humour, wanting to sing and chant with their fellow supporters, but also meet other people. That's a great thing. And there were certainly those elements there at Euro 88. And I love it. It's a memory, or series of memories I'll take with me to my grave.
Yeah, I've been to a couple of Euro tournaments, not specifically following England. And I think they undersell, or, that FIFA or UEFA undersell the camaraderie and social aspect of it. And I think it's partly because of this era of football that, internationally, they'd never seen hooliganism before, a lot of these countries. And that in particular, how do you navigate your way to watching the great match that we're going to talk about, as we always do on a Verge, as you always do on a Brazilian Shirt Name podcast, with, in my view, the best goal that I've seen in an international tournament. I still dream of that goal today. But anyway, we'll come to that. But how do you, as an England fan, following England to Euro 1988, how do you separate yourself, stand aloof of the hooligan element?
I think for me and Anne, it was a case of just following our nose, staying away from the trouble. I mean, it always kind of slightly baffles me when people go to foreign countries and then spend their entire time, and this is not just true of football fans, hanging about with people from the same country, of the same background. I was a working class kid from a council estate, from a council flat in Birmingham. the last thing I wanted to do is hang about with other people, and no disrespect to them, who also came from council estates in Birmingham. I wanted to see the world. I wanted to see what was going on, but in a context that I could understand. And football was that context. I suppose it gave me the confidence and the courage to travel, which I didn't really have before. So for me, it was about, as I say, the adventure, about seeing what other people were doing, but also wanting my team to do well. I mean, England had a cracking team at that time. Robson, Hoddle, Lineker. And as you said, Tim, you go into that tournament thinking that England are, at the very least, serious.
I vividly remember the anthems playing before the Ireland game, which was the first game, and thinking this is the team that's going to win it. I vividly remember that. And actually, they slaughtered Ireland and lost 1-0. And no one slaughtered Ireland for years after that, as England did. No, but the ball just wouldn't go in. And one move, which was a sequence of defensive mistakes, and was it Ray Houghton who scored the winner for the Ireland. And then there's the Holland game, which is a fabulous game. It's a really good game. And to be in that stadium must have been a terrific privilege when we just couldn't cope with Van Basten. Poor old Tony Adams couldn't cope with Van Basten. But we were in the game. You know, Robson scored a terrific equaliser, and it was a terrific game, you know.
Oh, man. I mean, yeah, absolutely, Tim. England hit the woodwork twice in that game. I think Lineker hit a post. I think Hoddle hit a post. But
and remember, this is vital for Holland. Yeah. Vital. It's a final for Holland.
They'd lost their first game, hadn't they, too?
Both England and Holland had lost the first game. So whoever loses, it's like an anticipated final almost, that game against Holland. And it's a fabulous game. And Van Basten makes the difference. The third game against the Soviet Union, you're one of the very few people who saw it, because in English TV didn't show it, because Ireland were playing at the same time. Really? And Ireland had a chance to go through. So the Ireland game was the one that was on TV. And all we got was potted highlights of the game against the Soviet Union.
Those are the days. Oh, my
when
word.
He had a look, Bobby Robson had a look at Glenn Hoddle as sweeper. And it could have been a long-term pattern. And Hoddle pissed it up. He gave a goal away. He got caught in possession in his own penalty area. And we ended up getting hammered in that one as well. So you're one of the very few people in this country, Adrian, who actually saw that game.
Which, from memory, I think it was in Frankfurt, 3-0 defeat against the Soviet Union. And we did get the English papers the next day, and there were cartoons of Tony Adams with donkey ears on him. Yeah. There were calls for Bobby Robson to be sacked. I mean, the full vitriol of the English tabloid press was turned on that team. And yeah, watching the games, really, they were better than that. I mean, it was a pretty abject performance, I have to say, the final game against the Soviet Union. But in the previous two games, as you say, Tim, they'd played well against Ireland, kind of slightly stodgy game, and they lost to a goal. It can happen, can't it? And then they were playing a genuinely all-time world-class Dutch team in the second game and gave them a real good match. So it was one of those things. But talking about the atmosphere of the tournament and following England, as I say, I'd gone out there with perhaps a naive view of English football fans. I'd seen a few England games at Wembley before that, but I'd never followed England abroad until this tournament. And it was quite an eye-opener for some of the more negative elements that associated them very specifically with the England football team. And I was by no means naive, I think, about how football supporters were, but the kind of some of the xenophobia, the racism really did take me by surprise. But there were even little things. You know, these were big bowl-like stadiums in Germany, by the standards of the day, very modern stadiums. Summers, afternoons or evenings, and the crowd getting up and doing the old Mexican wave, and they'd go all the way around the ground. And then you'd hear the England fans, or some of the England fans, saying, "Don't join in, don't join in, don't join in." That level of nastiness and the desire not to participate.
Yeah, kind of nihilism.
Incredible.
We've always had that, though. We've always had that. Even, you know, going back to the days of Henry V. You know, well, you say that.
I don't remember him not joining in the Mexican.
Well, he didn't join in the flipping.
Henry VIII would have had problems standing up to do it, I think.
Although he got a servant to do it for him. Great wrestler as a young man, but yeah, after he put on weight. But no, the Henry V comparison is that when Henry V is going off to invade France, the French, royal lot, they're playing tennis. And this is the first mention of tennis in any sort of literature or otherwise. The first mention is in Henry V. And of course, we should have been the inventors of tennis. We should have just said, look, we'll take that game and do it. But Henry V crucially didn't join in. And we haven't joined in a lot of other things. We go there, but we never learn their language. We're not having any of that. We go overseas and we're not going to eat their food. We're not having any of that. I once, as a journalist, as a newspaper journalist, was sent to Paris to cover Michael Jackson coming over in this year. 1988, that we're going to be talking about some more. The beginning of 88, Michael Jackson came over to the UK, came over to Europe on his first sort of solo tour ever after the Jackson 5. And I was sent to cover it. He went to Paris first before he came to England. And I was with a photographer. And I ain't even embarrassed to tell you what his name is. And he's not to be confused with somebody with the same name, BBC Radio 5 Live. The photographer was Colin Patterson. We were driving around. He was miserable because we had to have a car because we knew we'd be doing a lot of chasing Michael Jackson around. And we're driving this car, get to Paris in the middle of the night or near enough late in the evening. And he's miserable the whole time. He's been miserable since we got off the flipping, was it Eurostar? No, I think it was a ship in those days, the ferry. And he then sees a McDonald's sign on the Champs-Élysées. So, yeah, don't stop here. I'm like, are you having a flipping laugh? We're in France. I refuse. I was like, you're going to eat couscous tonight, mate. I'm sorry. And he wasn't having, and I thought it was a joke. I thought, oh, when he gets to couscous, he'll see what I mean. That, but no, he look, no, I don't like this. This is shit.
I'll tell you what. I've got a great story, Dotun and Tim, that fits in with exactly what you're saying, Dotun. Because in the charts that I know we're going to look at this week, Atmosphere by Joy Division, one of my all-time favorite bands. And in Peter Hook's autobiography, he talked about the first time that he went abroad with New Order to Holland, and they were doing, I think, a Dutch tour or a European tour, and he didn't eat for about 3 weeks. And at some point, a waitress came over to him and said, is there anything I can get you? And he went, oh, no, I don't like the food here in Holland. And she said, well, do you like eggs? He said, yeah, I like eggs. Do you like chips? Yeah. We do egg and chips in Holland. But he had never eaten pasta. And I know what you're saying about the tradition of English exceptionalism, particularly English rather than British.
It's not just English. It's not just English. My mate Dave Corio, who's a photographer, used to take photographs for all the main music papers back in the day. He tells me a story of when Public Enemy first came over here. I went and saw the gig, actually. They were bottom of the bill. It was Public Enemy, then it was Eric B. and Rakim at the top. It was LL Cool J, played at Hammersmith Odeon, I seem to remember very well. But anyway, when they came over, first time they're coming over from the States, and we're going to talk music later on, and we'll talk about how Atmosphere tells you exactly where Morrissey got it from. But anyway, that aside for a moment, that's just a little bit of a teaser. But yeah, so Public Enemy are coming over from the US, and in those days, on the underground, you knew who they were already, but they hadn't blown up. So he goes to meet them at Heathrow Airport. He takes the bus or the coach that they're in all the way in from Heathrow Airport. They are flipping miserable the whole time. Chuck D, miserable. Flavor Flav, miserable. Professor Griff, miserable. And then they get to Hyde Park Corner, and they see the Golden Arches. It's the same thing, and they just lighten up. I've had that with Samuel L. Jackson, and that wasn't particularly with the Golden Arches. That was just, I was about the 50th in line to interview him that morning. And I wasn't to know that, first of all, he's fucking pissed off that he's had to do so many interviews. And he's also told them to go and get him a flipping hamburger, and it hasn't arrived. So honestly, I was like, I'm the 50th one, but at least I'm the only brother. You get me, Sam? And he was like, I don't give a shit who you are. He didn't actually say these words, but he gave me that look like, I know you think I'm just going to be a better interview with you because you're a brother. I don't give a shit. I want my hamburger. And when his hamburger came, the joke about it was he got the hamburger. He wasn't interested in the rest of the interview. That's a true story. All of those are true.
Gene Hackman in French Connection 2 when he's in Marseille.
Very good
bring
point.
me a ham. Do you cremate the fucking thing? You cremate the fucking thing? I want mayo relish. Mayo relish. Not good travelers.
I hope there's a sponsorship from the Golden Arches coming from this blooming episode.
Well, they probably
Adrian,
won't sponsor us.
Once England are eliminated and you can just get on and enjoy the rest of the tournament without the tension, is every day like Friday?
It was, except I didn't have a lot of money at the time. I mean, I was writing this fanzine off the ball, and I don't know how I lived. I can't think. I didn't really work. I was doing a bits and bobs of freelance journalism, but earning. I kind of, you imagine in today's money, I was probably earning about $8,000 a year. I was desperate to break into journalism and writing. The fanzine made me no money. I was writing for local events and listings magazines and newspapers in Birmingham. So it was great. And John Williams was wonderful with me. I can't talk highly enough of John, who was and is a sociologist at Leicester University. So he was very generous with me. We used to have to top and tail in his hotel room. He used to kind of let me have a few chips off his golden.
What's happened to Anne by this stage, I wonder?
Anne had gone after the first week.
Right.
What can I say? What can I say? My charm had done its usual, and she'd buggered off back home.
Mate, listen, you know,
I told you nothing happened.
Maybe she would like you to stop stressing that nothing happened. At this point, it's like, Adrian, mate, look, we get it. But in case listeners don't know, we always have a look at an iconic match from sometime in the football firmament on the Brazilian Shirt Name podcast. And we usually tell you what that game is and when it was. We haven't done that yet, so we may as well do it now. So we're talking about the Euros 88 and the final of the Euros 88, USSR versus the Netherlands, took place on the 25th of June. In Germany, as Adrian's already told us. He was one of the football fans there. Why did you want to look particularly at this game? Because England are out now, didn't get out the group stages, got 0 points, as it were, and even Republic of Ireland got 3 points.
As I imagine was said.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. It's obviously Vorsprung technique, but yeah, if you want to go for it.
With a bit of dork in the middle.
Indeed.
Well, I bet I'm the dork, aren't I? Anyway, but to pick up on the point you made earlier, Dotun, there were a number of great games in this tournament. I'd say the Holland-England game, albeit that England lost, was a great game of football, and I like to think I'm a football fan enough to acknowledge that even when your team loses. The semi-final between Germany and Holland, which I also saw.
Fantastic game.
Phenomenal. Yeah. And I was in the stadium, the atmosphere. I mean, at that time, we talked about English football hooliganism. Germany had an issue with hooligans in that era.
And the Dutch fucking hated them, didn't they? It was a time when the Dutch had kind of rediscovered war memories.
Indeed. And so the song was, or the phrase was, "Your granddad stole my bike."
Yeah,
there's a story about Holland, about the German soldiers having taken the bikes, not necessarily to ride, although they did do that, the German occupied troops in World War II, but they'd melted down the metal, I think, for armaments, taken the pneumatic tires on the inside, or the rubber from the tires. So there was we think England-Scotland's a bitter rivalry. Really? Try Holland, Germany, folks. It really was bitter. So you had that. The Dutch, although they had domestic football hooligans, the fans who followed Holland away were not really that way inclined. But
they were a party crowd, weren't they?
Yeah, but there were big numbers of German skinheads in Hamburg and singing Deutschland for Deutschlanders, Auslanders aus, Germany for Germans, foreigners out. This is in Germany in the 1980s. So
I've had that experience in Germany in about 82, 81, 82. I've had a similar experience. Although on the flip side of it, there were enough German football fans, and this was Hamburg, there were enough German football fans who came to protect me, who stood and because I was the lone black person in
Wow.
that situation.
Wow.
Yeah,
I
and it
mean,
was
German football fans then and now were predominantly like German society, generally, profoundly anti-racist. They were not typical, but they were there in some numbers.
sure.
That was pretty scary. But so those were two great games. But the final was this is going to make you jealous now, Dotun. So I got a tout ticket, and I what about 20 quid at the time, probably, I don't know, about 150 quid now, because Russia were in it, Soviet Union were in it. They didn't have very many wealthy fans who could travel, and people had bought tickets expecting Germany to be there, maybe expecting England to be there. So it was actually relatively easy to get a ticket outside. And I was sitting low down on the side, directly behind Marco Van Basten.
Oh my goodness.
With Muren's cross. And I had a camera with me. I was able to take in a proper camera in those days.
Wow.
And I pictured it. I got a picture of it. It was absolutely astonishing.
Does that mean that you couldn't enjoy the moment?
No, not at all. I mean, I was trying to get pictures for my fanzine off the ball, but I mean, I was engrossed in the game. I'm one of those people, I can be there and have my phone out and still get lost in it. And I was, in a way, because I had a camera there, and it was an old-fashioned film camera. You're conscious that every shot that you take, that's it. You can't take 20. Yeah, it's got to count. So I'm really focusing intently on the game, thinking, can I get a moment here? Can I get a moment here? And I could not believe that when Van Basten. It was just an astonishing goal. And you look back at it now, it's floating over to him. And there's something about that angle and the way in which it connects, the way in which the keeper just doesn't quite cotton on to what's going on. It is one of the great goals.
And let's not forget it's a volley as well. In fact, to make the volley, he's already had to work hard and twist his body into a shape that will make his foot connect to it. I've watched that goal over and over and over again, and it's one of those goals that makes less sense each time you watch it, because like, okay, let me see that one more time.
Yeah.
Nah. Let me do it one more time. It just goes like that for me. And that's over a number of years, by the way.
We can't forget the first goal either, where I think Ruud Gullit needed Emu to head that ball in. I think it was Ruud Gullit and Emu.
Ironically, on the first goal,
it was a kind of Emu type header.
It's the movement of his head, isn't
it?
Yeah.
He'd missed the cross. There was a corner on the right, and it came towards the back post. And in fact, Gullit missed the corner, which he should have got really on the near post. The ball was nodding clear, and he'd started running backwards. Yes. But again, that thing that you always tell kids when they're playing football: never turn your back on the ball. Always keep your eyes on the ball, because the ball then is cleared by the German defender. There's a header over to the far side of the penalty area, and Gullit.
Sorry, the Soviet defender.
Sorry,
the Soviet. That's right. Yes,
the Soviet defender heads it out. The ball then is nodded back in by a Dutch player, and Gullit can see what's going on, and he runs back in, and then, well, what a connection for that.
I think there's something which is, honestly, I think, which is really missing from the kind of popular memory of this game, which is how good the Soviet Union were. I mean, they were fabulous in the World Cup of '86, just gloriously, madly attacking. And they went out. I think it was a great game against Belgium, and they lost 4-3 when they just couldn't defend. But they were fabulous to watch. And they've tightened up a little bit. And in this tournament, they've beaten Holland already. They've slammed England. They've beaten a very good young Italian side, which is being prepared for Italia 90. And here they are again in the final against Holland. Now, Holland, remember, haven't qualified for the World Cup in '86. In Italia 90, they won't win a single game. So this is, in a Holland shirt, this is the moment for this team, for these players. It's the only time, and it's amazing that Marco Van Basten didn't play in a team that won a game in a World Cup. It's extraordinary.
No, well, and again,
this is their moment, and you saw it.
You're right, and you're saying the Soviet Union were a very good side. They had a couple of very good chances early on in this final. They also had a penalty saved in the final. I mean, a really fierce shot from the penalty. Van Breukelen had brought down a Soviet player, protested as they always do, but it was a clear penalty.
Well, he's a great protester, Van Breukelen. Soon afterwards, when they brought in the keepers couldn't pick up back passes, he went ballistic. He's great. I cannot play football. That's why I'm a goalkeeper. Now they have to make me play football. I cannot do this.
Is that Steve
He took up darts after that. Yeah.
But they were very good and really decent. All of the Dutch games, by the way. I mean, the game against England mentioned the fact that England hit the post twice, although Holland in the end won handsomely 3-1. That game against Germany, Germany had opportunities. Van Basten got a hat-trick against England. He got 2 in the semi-final against Germany, and he got this worldie against the Soviet Union. And I think, although the Netherlands were a good side, they were a good side with some great individuals. Gullit was one. Koeman at the back was another. Rijkaard and Van Basten. I mean, a finisher unsurpassed, really. And they built a team around 3 or 4 great players. And if you've got 2 great players, I think you've got a chance of winning a tournament. I think they had 4, and around that they had just a bunch of good players. That's often enough.
Just back to the Soviet Union for a moment, or CCCP as we knew them. And I wish I had one of those shirts, don't you? But
I remember someone going to Russia for the World Cup here in Brazil saying, I'm doing all my preparation. I'm learning the acrylic alphabet. I thought, you might
wrong alphabet, yes. Yeah, it's acrylic, yeah, I get it. But what I was thinking, this is a year away from just over a year away from the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Yeah.
2 years after that, the dissolution of the Soviet Union. So this arguably is the Soviet Union's last hurrah, isn't it? This is their big thing. Tim said a moment or two ago that one forgets how good they were. And yeah, I totally get that. They did seem to be a little bit off the pace later on in the match in this one, when they were struggling a bit in terms of physical fitness. But
was it hot? What was the weather like?
Yeah. It was hot. So it's in that as well. Because I don't know if you've been to the stadium now, the Allianz Arena, which is a great stadium where Bayern Munich play. And although it kind of, from the outside, it's kind of got that modern kind of circular swirl about it, inside it's quite a boxy stadium actually, and a very good atmosphere. But the incredible wavy roof of the old Olympiastadion, I've never been in a stadium like that. I don't know what it'd be like if it started pissing down, quite honestly. But it was an amazing stadium to look at and to be around. I mean, inside, I seem to remember it as being quite a basic stadium. It wasn't astonishing inside, but you look around you and you're in this kind of cathedral of football. But I do remember it being very sticky hot, and kind of, a cloudy, sticky hot. You're not necessarily sunbaked, but sultry. The weather around a lot of the tournament was quite sultry, as if you're waiting for thunderstorms to break out. And it was like that afternoon. It was definitely a difficult conditions to play football in.
Yeah, the point I was going to make was just about the difference. Weren't Soviet Union players essentially, not amateurs, but they weren't international players at this point. And we're already in the era of the millionaire footballers, the likes of Gullit, huge stars.
I think some of them have gone to Italy already. So some of that, so some of that is happening, because quite a few of them made a name for themselves in 86. Zavarov and Belanov, the centre forward, who had a great tournament in 86 and misses the penalty. So they were good. And if you look at the European competitions at that time, some of the Eastern European teams were right up there. I mean, just a couple of years before, a team from Romania has beaten Barcelona in the final of the old European Cup.
It's Bucharest, yeah. And I would say, Dotun, probably in those days, if you lived behind the Iron Curtain, as they say, you would have been, even if you were playing for a club side, you would have been well looked after. Those clubs were, the height of state intervention. You'd have had a very good living by the standards of your society, and you would have been quite pampered, I think, relative to the standards of that society. I mean, this was an era pre-Premier League when most English footballers, when they retired, had to get a job. They were
Running
still
a pub.
running a pub, opening a newsagents, or working in insurance. One of those.
And interesting as well about one thing that we haven't mentioned is all of the action. There's a good reason why we're talking about the England perspective here, because they're in the same group. The finalists, Holland or Netherlands and USSR, both in the same group as England and Republic of Ireland, Group 2. After England then get their 0 point, I imagine that's the point where things start kicking off in terms of hooliganism, and eventually for the British Prime Minister to subsequently intervene. Was that how you remember it?
No, the violence had happened earlier when England, I think mostly when England arrived in Dusseldorf. It was more when England, that was German hooligans intercepting England fans on the way to Dusseldorf when England were playing Holland, actually. And all the talk had been about England's top firms meeting these Dutch hooligans, who we acknowledge were lively at the time, but pretty much in Holland restricted to domestic football. But England had hooligan firms who travelled away, and because of so much of the hype that was around English football hooliganism at the time, I think the German hooligans saw that as a challenge, saw it as a threat, and they turned out in numbers for the game at Dusseldorf. Particularly, I remember a big ruck at Dusseldorf station, and we arrived in the aftermath of that to see windows put through, to see glass lying everywhere, to see sirens all in the environs of the station at Dusseldorf. And in fact, we got interviewed, me and Anne, by Das Bild, which is said to be the German equivalent of the Sun, but it isn't really. It's not a horrible right-wing rag. But we were interviewed by the Bild as the kind of the good side of English football. We were like the nice hooligans, as they called us.
And did
The
you let them
gentleman
know
hooligans, the hooligan you want to bring home some mum.
Yeah. Then how did Margaret Thatcher get involved in all of this? Do you remember that?
Yeah, well, because of Dusseldorf. Did she even go over there? I don't know. But I mean, because we saw those pictures, or you would have seen those pictures being back home, and because they were all over the papers, Thatcher, whose only interest in football was as a law and order issue, it was a classic something must be done moment. So she'd already got her clause in following it was a disgraceful riot at Millwall fans at Luton. There had been 1 or 2 incidents subsequent to that in domestic football, but then the English fans clashing in Germany with German fans, that was the moment when, we really are going to push through this membership scheme, as they called it, or an identity card scheme, as we called it. And the full kind of law and order apparatus started raining down on football fans. And sadly, we know where that ended, don't we? We ended that with so-called security fences, safety fences, behind which fans were crushed at Hillsborough, tragically.
So at the time, of course, there is a musical landscape as much as the social and political landscape that we've been talking about. And we've already touched on the music at the time. Should we skip over the number 1 song? Because the chart
every era needs its boy band thing, doesn't it? I mean, one thing because it's Bros at number 1 with Are You Nothing. One thing that fascinates me is you got Bros in the charts and you got Kylie Minogue.
Bros, not Bros. Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
Not
Right,
bros.
okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you got 2 kind of teeny bopper acts. And obviously one went very, very quickly and the other is still there.
Good point.
Is it easier for a female artist of this type to grow up with her audience than for a male?
Ooh.
I'm not sure about that. I mean, give me your thoughts as well.
I'll just throw
Adrian.
it into the cauldron of speculation to see what will emerge.
I'll say that would be disparaging the amazing. Well, she wasn't an amazing talent when she started out, but she is, I think, now as a pop diva. Kylie Minogue has managed to tap into that thing that maybe the likes of Madonna had, but it all comes through hard work because Madonna didn't start out.
Yeah, well, I'm not
like that
disparaging it at
either.
all, but Madonna is a less blatant example of the similar process, isn't it? It's at the start like a virgin. That's the kind of things you and then you kind of grow up with that audience in a way that I can't think of too many male equivalents that have been able to keep an audience and grow with the audience. George Michael, perhaps.
Yeah, although
Definitely.
so there's act. It's slightly different to boy bands or girl band. I'll give you that, or that kind of teen icon. But so two of the bands that I particularly love in this chart are the Smiths and Joy Division. Now, their
You've got a
following,
Mancunian soul, Mr. Goldberg.
They cut from the same cloth.
There's some
their
bloom of the Manchester sky, which has
Don't
addled
say it.
your brain.
I'm from Birmingham. I'm from the West Midlands. Don't do that to me.
Indeed.
Don't do that to me. But they're the people who love them would think of themselves as serious music fans. Of course, John Peel listeners. But really, they're attachments that people form when they're teenagers. And Morrissey and Ma in their different incarnations still have a huge following from that time. Joy Division obviously morphed into New Order again, who have a massive audience that's followed them through that time. So, the clothes might be different, but I think that desire to kind of cling to your childhood, cling to your teenage year is
those connections
universal.
that you make at that time, they are really, really strong, aren't they? This time is so evocative for me because from one council flat kid to another, I'm just about to go abroad for the first time. Never done it. And a couple of weeks after this game, I go with a group of mates. I go to the Algarve, and I'm at this point watching this game. I'm absolutely terrified of the flight, not because the risk of it going crashing. I'm living at this point on the flight path of Heathrow, and when you watch so many planes go overhead, nothing seems to go wrong. So I think I'll be all right. But I used to get, and probably still do, very badly travel sick, and I was petrified of, I'm going with a group of mates. I'm gonna, I know they have sick bags on planes. People have told me that they have sick bags on them. So I think, Christ, I'm gonna show up everyone. I'm gonna no. And then when you get up there and it's so suave, you can even read on a plane. Wow, this is all right. So this was my first time abroad. Oh, to be 23 again.
Well, this was a year, 1988, June 88, was a year after I left university. And, when you're at college, you listen to a lot of music, and not least indie music. The groups invariably populates the student tour landscape, very much indie music. So this chart, funny enough, although the top 10 and other parts of the charts, but particularly the top 10, is dominated by, pop, what can I say, the most sort of, plastic pop that you're going to get, like Bros, I Owe You Nothing. Well, come on now. Even the Fat Boys doing their Chubby Checker twist at number 4 is shocking, considering where the Fat Boys came from in terms of rap. But somebody's decided
they're going to make some money. That's
and there's a formula that they're working to. It's not a dissimilar formula to what they've done to Maxi Priest, who came from an underground reggae, because he was like part of the Saxon sound system. Now, regardless,
it's not his best, is it? This one, I love Maxi Priest, but this wide world is not his best.
He should have left it to Cat Stevens. The Pasadena's tribute is.
I love it.
But it's a formula, mate.
It is.
Not
but
one
of
the.
It's joyous.
Exactly, it does work. On this one, I don't think it works. This was their first one that got into the charts.
They couldn't really keep it up, could they?
Yeah, not really. In the Air Tonight, really interesting song by Phil Collins at number 8 there. And then
away from the pop, there's a couple of things that most interest me. The Communards. It's not a good song, but there's more to love than Boy Meets Girl.
Yeah.
Very, very explicit message of homosexual love.
Well,
and
Boy George.
Yeah. No Clause 28.
I was going to pick up on
the
this.
Thatcher clampdown on public funding of homosexual activities,
This
and
is-
he's ahead of the curve musically as well. You know, the in terms of the theme, and society has caught up so much with this. It's like looking at a barbarian village. You know, some of the attitudes
Well,
towards sexuality.
it's fantastic, isn't it,
88.
to reflect, though, isn't it? So many of these changes, certainly I'd suggest in our lifetime, have been communicated through popular music, you know,
Yes.
these attitudinal changes. And it's not the only place where those kind of more positive messages, more socially liberal messages have been carried, but possibly the most important and the most powerful.
Agreed.
People dancing to songs, singing to
Free
songs.
Nelson Mandela, you know,
Yeah.
you can't get more potent than that in terms of a
And
political
making
slogan.
that link. You know, this Boy George song, it samples Public Enemy. The very next week in the charts, the very next week, Public Enemy, Don't Believe the Hype, goes into the charts, as does Eric B. and Rakim, Follow the Leader. Now, at this point,
Meanwhile,
88
Dotton's sitting in the Golden Arches with Public Enemy.
No, that wasn't me. That was my mate.
All right. Don't spoil it.
Sorry.
at this point, this is still a little bit underground, isn't it?
Yeah.
I really got into it the following year. I remember when Do the Right Thing came out in the middle of '89, and that I was already getting into it, and that film just blew it. But this is the new thing coming in. Around this time, Dotun, were you doing Night Network? You know, with the
Yes.
rather bizarrely eccentric Tim Westwood playing this kind of music and saying, calling and a ruling with a gangster boogie, Biz
Okay,
Markie,
hold
bus
on.
it. And me
Yeah.
thinking, what the
Yeah.
fuck is he talking about?
I will admit, and nobody readily acknowledges any link to Tim Westwood because of the allegations that come out about him. But I was doing Night Network, and I remember sitting with Public Enemy on a.
Did you bus it? I can't imagine Public Enemy bussing it. They'd
Well,
got a
we were
limo.
on a coach. We were definitely on a coach outside London Weekend Television's upper ground on the South Bank. And Tim Westwood getting on board and arguing with maybe Flavor Flav that he was just exactly the same age as Chuck D or something like that. I just remember that conversation out there. Yeah, but my filming at Night Network used to come, I think, before Tim Westwood's one or after. I can't remember which way round it was. But at this time, then in 1988, what I remember most, certainly from this chart, is being a year out of university, but crucially, very crucially, actually, I was where it happened for Misha Paris, because this is
I
her
love
first
that
single,
song.
My One Temptation.
Love it.
Well, I was there. That song was funded, produced, developed, and Misha Paris as an artist was developed by the Voice newspaper. The boss of the Voice newspaper, who's no longer with us, decided to have, I mean, we had this amazing, huge venue in Brixton at the time. And the boss of the Voice newspaper thought, right, I'm going to corner a bit off to put a studio in and develop black music, you know, like Berry Gordy or something like that. He had some really talented people working on it. So Misha Paris was coming in there from the age of 15, you know, and I think by this time, My One Temptation, she might have been 17, 18. So it's taken 3 years to build. But because I was the music editor at The Voice at the time, I was right on it and I saw her being developed. Nicky Brown was the producer. He was really young. He couldn't have been more than about 15 or 16. Saw him the other day being the musical director for what's her name? It's on the tip of my tongue now. I can't
David
remember.
Niven? He doesn't
No,
need a
not
musical
David
director.
Niven. No, not David Niven. It will come to me in a moment, I hope. But anyway, so that's what I remember about this charts at the time. You know, seeing Misha Paris get into the charts. I think it went up to about number 10 or 11 in the charts at the time. It's down to number on this chart, number 19 now. But there are other, you know, interesting things. Tracy Chapman, Fast Car. So we just
I've
learned
never
about.
liked it. Never
It's a
liked it.
brilliant
I always,
tune.
I just think it's dull. Sorry.
Oh, sorry,
nothing for
Adrian.
me.
What did I say? Go on,
No,
Adrian. You've got that look
Tim
on
not
your
liking
face.
fast
It's
car.
arguing with me.
It's a terrific song. Yeah.
Brilliant.
But I'd say that as the two musical things that I'm picking up on for me were obviously Blue Monday. You know, you got the dawn of this indie
brilliant
dance
track.
crossover, haven't you?
Yeah.
This is when people are starting to drop E's, when indie stops just being whiny white boys with guitars. Somebody else has copyrighted that phrase, you know, even though there's some great examples of that, for example, with the Smiths in here, who I love. But, you know, the whole scene is about to explode and go somewhere else with the birth of rave. You've got that. And you've also just got another great song, Push It by Salt and Pepper. It's a brilliant
It's
tune.
rubbish. I used to think it was brilliant.
What?
I
Yeah.
used to think it was brilliant, but
Yeah.
now for me, that is like a nursery rhyme, mate, Adrian, because maybe because rap has developed quite a lot. I used to think it was brilliant as a pop rap thing, and it did break the ground to allow rap to make it into the pop firmament. And these two young women, or three as they were with the Spinderella, they were the best sort of advert actually for rap, because the other side of rap was like, no, we're bad boys, like we've heard with Public Enemy. But now I listen to that and I just think, oh my goodness, for me this is not far off being a rap version of Bros with their number one sing, I Owe You Nothing, or When Will I Be
You're
Faithful.
hard. That's a harsh,
I'm
man.
sorry, mate, I'm sorry, apologies.
Did I tell you I saw Bros in concert, by the way?
You see, you're being harsh on Bros now then.
I was. I went to see him at the. I was about a year later. I started writing for Sounds, the music paper.
I remember that. Yeah,
I had my young niece live with me at the time, and of course she was the perfect demographic for Bros. So I had the chance to get free tickets to go and see Bros. What's a man to do? I went to see him, slagged them
got
off.
to do it. Well, why not? Do you know I wrote for Sounds as well? I wrote for Sounds, Enemy, Melody Maker, all of those. So we're possibly circling around the same freelance, circuit at the time. But yeah, great days. Listen, this chart is great. Oh, by the way, a half big shout out for Cuddly Toy by Roachford. He was on his way to doing what Living Colour did for black rock in the United States. He was on his way. He was very close, and I remember the likes of Mick Jagger saying, "No, Roachford is going to be the next big thing." That Cuddly Toy was an amazing track, I thought at the time, but they lost their way. I think the second one after that was Family Man. Cuddly Toy, I'm pretty sure, was the first one. Then Family Man after that, and then they kind of lost their way, which is a pretty shame. But he's still around, Roachford, and I'm sure he's still pretty much as good as he was then, because the guy's talented. I love to see Joe Strummer in the charts, by the way. And Fair Play, just quick one more word. Just remember that number 77, Fair Play by Soul to Soul. This was their first of their 4 big tracks, or 5 big tracks really, that broke them into the charts. This was the first. This is where Soul to Soul starts. So before this, they're like this sound system that used to play at the Africa Centre and everything like that. Then they do what is they basically make a rare groove track. That's what this Fair Play is, with this amazing singer who's still around called Rose Windross. And it captures, particularly with this sort of fuzzy bass that it's got, it captures the rare groove crowd who were the underground of the underground at the time. If you like into, music that was just below the radar of pop and everything, you're underground. Well, underground, or the rare groove crowd, were even more underground than you. So you went to a rare groove club, and that was the underground of the underground, if you see what I mean. Yeah. Oh, amazing time for us.
Just a final word on Morrissey, one of your people, Adrian. He's in with Every Day's Like Sunday. Was that line from Jerry Sadowitz? Everyone grows out of their Morrissey fears, except Morrissey. Did you grow out of your Morrissey phase?
I think Morrissey's a dick. Obviously, 2024 Morrissey is a dick, but Johnny Marr isn't. And
it's true.
If I can take away the kind of the horrible gauze of modern day Morrissey and listen to that, Every Day's Like Sunday, I think it's a brilliant song, and it connects with the inner adolescent in me, the inner adolescent that I've never lost and hopefully will never lose. And I think the Smiths and early Morrissey as a solo artist, or maybe not even early Morrissey, some of Morrissey as a solo artist, great music that stands up for me. Sorry, Jerry, I disagree.
You've been an amazing guest. Really, genuinely, you've taken us back there to 1988, 25th of June, USSR v the Netherlands in the Euro 88 final. But you've also shown us what it was, or it is, to be an England fan following England in Europe. I think there's more to this, mate. I mean, generally, let's do it again at some point. Adrian Goldberg. And where can we hear from you again?
You can check out my Where's the Money Gone podcast with Charlie Methven, and also check me out on the Byline Times podcast as well.
Cheers, mate. Tim, all the best.
See you both.